I was looking for my phone charger when I saw a group chat on my son's laptop. Operation Nursing Home Monday 8 a.m. My daughter replied, "Finally, then we can rent out our house." I smiled, opened my banking app, and made one transfer. Monday morning, they arrived with papers, but when they saw what I'd done, they fell to their knees. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The charger was not in its usual place. I had checked the outlet by the lamp, the one in the kitchen, and the basket on the hall table. My phone's battery was a low, red line. Marcus had been over earlier, talking about market fluctuations on my sofa, and I thought perhaps he had borrowed it. His laptop bag was still on the floor by the armchair, a black slash against the cream rug. I told myself I would just look for the cord, a simple intrusion. The bag was unzipped. Inside, next to a sleek tablet, was a white charging block with the familiar cord coiled around it. I pulled it out. As I did, the edge of my hand brushed the trackpad of his open laptop, left in sleep mode on top of his files. The screen glowed to life, blinding in the dimming evening light of my living room. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a messaging application, a column of familiar profile pictures. Marcus's stern headshot, Vanessa's smiling professional photo, Jason's blurry selfie. The group name was The Stakeholders. The last message from Marcus was timestamped 2 hours ago. "Vanessa, did you get the brochures from Maple Grove? Their memory care unit looks top tier." My fingers went cold. I stood very still, the charger dangling from my hand. I did not mean to read further, but my eyes, traitors, moved up the thread. Vanessa had replied, "Got them. More importantly, I had a colleague run a comparative market analysis on the house. Conservative estimate is $750K. It's a gold mine, but it's stuck in a time capsule. We need to move fast before she fills it with more knickknacks." A sound left my throat, a short, dry click. I sat down heavily on the armchair opposite, the one my husband Charles used to favor. The laptop screen burned my retinas. Jason had written, "This feels heavy. Are we sure? Mom loves that house." Marcus's response was immediate. "Sentiment isn't an asset class, Jay, it's a liability. Operation Nursing Home starts Monday. We present a unified front. It's for her own good. She's not getting any younger, and that staircase is a lawsuit waiting to happen." "I'll bring the paperwork," Vanessa wrote. "We get her to agree to a valuation, get her into a facility where she can be looked after. Then we list. Split 3 ways, it's $250,000 each. That's life-changing money." For her own good, Jason had finally replied just that. The words were clinical, a market analysis, a liability, an operation. I read them again, then a third time. The physical sensation came then, a cold hollowing out beneath my ribs as if someone had reached in and carefully removed a vital organ. There was no pain, not yet, just a profound, airless vacancy. I looked around my living room. The afternoon sun slanted through the bay window, catching the motes of dust above the sofa I had scrimped and saved for. The photographs on the mantel, graduations, weddings, a black-hand white of Charles and me on our porch swing. The Afghan I had knitted, draped over the back of the chair I now sat in. A time capsule, a gold mine, a liability. My pearls felt heavy against my collarbone. I had put them on that morning out of habit, a small act of order. They had been my mother's. I touched them now, the cool, smooth spheres a tangible anchor in a room that seemed to tilt. Memories intruded, not as flashes, but as cold, clear facts. Working overtime as an office manager to pay for Marcus's business school application fees. Spending my bonus on Vanessa's real estate licensing course. Endlessly patient with Jason's false starts, his rent checks discreetly left in his apartment mailbox. I had considered it an investment. In them. In their futures. This, it seemed, was my return. The hollow space inside me began to fill, not with heat, but with a dense, quiet substance. It was the weight of recognition. I had been a line item in their spreadsheet, the asset to be liquidated. I carefully closed the laptop. The screen went dark, returning it to a harmless slab of metal and glass. I placed the charger I had come for on top of it. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the tap. I drank it all. The view from my kitchen window was of the backyard, the rose bushes Charles had planted for our 20th anniversary. They needed pruning. Monday. Operation Nursing Home commenced on Monday. Today was Friday. I rinsed the glass and placed it in the drying rack. I smoothed the front of my dress. I walked back into the living room, picked up my dead phone, and plugged it into the charger I had retrieved. A small, orange battery icon appeared. I had 2 days. The initial shock had crystallized into a single, sharp point of understanding. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan. They had discussed it, analyzed it, scheduled it. My feelings, my desires, my life in this home were irrelevant data points. I thought of Charles. He had left me comfortably provided for, his life insurance and his pension carefully managed. I had been frugal, adding to it over the years. The house was paid for. My money was my own. They saw it as theirs, an inheritance prematurely awaiting collection. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a puzzle presenting its solution. They believed me to be a problem to be solved, sweet, aging, slightly in the way a leaner. They expected docility. They expected a mother's guilt to soften the blow. I was their mother, but I was also a leaner St. James, who had balanced budgets for a demanding firm for 30 years, who had negotiated contracts and soothed angry clients and managed complex schedules without ever raising her voice. I knew about plans. I knew about execution. I went to my small home office, the one they called my little nook. I took out a fresh, yellow legal pad and a black pen. At the top, I wrote the date. Then I wrote a single line. What do they know? I listed the facts they assumed. 1, that I was unaware. 2, that my finances were simple and accessible. 3, that my will made after Charles died still named them as equal beneficiaries. 4, that my emotional attachment to the house and my role as their mother would make me compliant. I turned the page. I wrote another heading. What do I know? I knew the account numbers at First Heritage Bank, where Mr. Higgins still asked after my garden. I knew the name of my attorney, Franklin Briggs, who had handled Charles's estate. I knew the exact value of my savings, my investments, the quiet fund I had started for myself years ago, a secret even from Charles. A just-in-case fund. The case had arrived. I knew the location of every important document in the fireproof box in my closet. I knew the password to my own digital life. I knew how to make an appointment. I knew how to sign my name. Most importantly, I knew now what they were, and knowing that changed everything. The phone on my desk chimed, vibrating as it drew power. I picked it up. A text notification lit the screen. It was from our family group chat, the one called Mom and Kids. It was Vanessa. Hey, Mom, thinking of you. Marcus and Jason and I were wondering if we could all come over for a chat on Monday morning. Maybe around 9. We have something we'd love to discuss with you. Love you. I stared at the words. The smiley face emoji after love you looked like a grimace. I could see her typing it, her face a mask of performative affection, her mind already staging each room for the photographer. My fingers hovered over the screen. The calm inside me was absolute. I typed my reply, my movements precise. That sounds lovely, dear. I'll put the coffee on, see you then. I pressed send. The message whooshed away, a bird returning to its cage. I placed the phone back on the desk. I looked at my list. The silence of the house, which moments before had felt like the silence of abandonment, now felt like the silence before a symphony. It was my silence. It was my house. I had other plans, and they began now. The message sent, I placed the phone face down on the legal pad. The 2 lists stared back at me. I picked up the pen again. Under what do I know? I added a 5th point. They have scheduled the operation for Monday, 9 a.m. Then I drew a line across the page. Below it, I wrote a new heading, Counter Operations. The first item was simple. Saturday, 10 a.m., First Heritage Bank, see Mr. Higgins. The hollow feeling had not returned. It had been replaced by a focused clarity. I realized I was hungry. I had not eaten since lunch. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple dinner, a chicken breast, some steamed vegetables, a slice of bread. I ate at the kitchen table, chewing methodically, tasting nothing. The radio played softly, a jazz station Charles had liked. The music felt like background noise in a play where I was both audience and sole actor. After washing my plate, I returned to the living room. I did not look at Marcus's laptop bag. I sat in my chair and looked at the room with new eyes, not as a home, but as an asset. I noted the solid oak floors, the updated electrical wiring we had done in 2010, the roof replaced 5 years ago. Vanessa was not wrong about the market value. She was only wrong about who owned it. The doorbell rang at 7:30. I did not startle. I checked the peephole. It was Jason. He stood on the porch, his hands in his pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I opened the door. "Jason, this is a surprise." "Hey, Mom." He leaned in for a quick, awkward hug. He smelled of fried food and fabric softener. "I was just in the neighborhood, thought I'd check in." "In the neighborhood," I said, stepping back to let him in. My neighborhood was 20 minutes from his apartment, out of the way of anywhere he usually went. "Yeah, driving around." He walked into the living room, his eyes darting to his brother's laptop bag, then away. "Is Marcus here?" "He was earlier. He left his things." I gestured to the armchair. "Sit, can I get you something?" No, I'm good." He sat on the edge of the sofa, not leaning back. He looked at me, then at the photographs on the mantel. "You doing okay?" "I'm perfectly fine," I said, taking my own seat. I smoothed my dress over my knees. "Why wouldn't I be?" He shrugged, a jerky movement. "No reason, just you live alone, gotta check on you." "That's very thoughtful." I kept my voice light, neutral. "I actually just heard from your sister. She said you all want to come over Monday for a chat." His face changed. It was a subtle tightening around his eyes, a slight press of his lips. He looked down at his hands. Yeah, she mentioned that. She said you have something to discuss, something lovely." He winced. The word lovely had hit its mark. It's just some ideas for the future." "My future?" I asked. "The family's future," he said quickly, too quickly. He was a terrible liar. He always had been. As a boy, a stolen cookie was written plainly across his guilty face. The guilt was there now, mixed with a deep unease. "I see." I let the silence stretch. I watched him wrestle with it. He wanted to say something. The part of him that had written "This feels heavy" was battling the part that went along with his siblings. "Mom," he began, then stopped. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the boy he had been, soft and unsure. "You're happy here, right? In this house?" "Yes," I said. "I am. It's my home. It holds my life." He nodded, swallowing hard. "It's a big house for one person, a lot of upkeep." "I manage." I tilted my head. "Is that what this is about? The upkeep? Because if you're worried about me physically, I had my annual checkup last month. Dr. Evans says I have the bones of a 40-year-old. His words. "No, it's not that," Jason mumbled. He stood up abruptly. "I should go, I just wanted to see you." "Before Monday." The question hung in the air. He flinched. "It's not like that, we want what's best." "I know you do," I said, rising as well. My tone was gentle, the perfect maternal tone. It seemed to cause him physical pain. He could not meet my eyes. I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Jason," I said, and I did. The love was a separate thing now, a sharp, aching object placed on a high shelf. I could see it, but I could not touch it without cutting myself. He left. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it. The performance was exhausting. The observation was critical. His visit was a probe, a weak attempt to gauge my state of mind before the main event. Or perhaps his own conscience had driven him here. It didn't matter. It provided data. Sunday arrived, the planned dinner. Vanessa had insisted. "Just a casual family supper, Mom. Don't go to any trouble." I went to the usual trouble. I roasted a chicken with rosemary and lemon. I made mashed potatoes from scratch. I set the dining room table with the good china, the set my own mother had given me. I put on a blue dress and fastened my pearls. They arrived together. Marcus, in a crisp polo shirt, carrying a bottle of wine he did not bother to let breathe. Vanessa in a stylish tunic smelling of new perfume. Jason trailing behind them, his shoulders slumped. "Something smells amazing," Vanessa said, air-kissing my cheek. Her eyes swept the dining room, and I knew she was not seeing the meal or the family gathering. She was seeing crown molding and floorboard condition. "You didn't have to go all out," Marcus said, handing me the wine. His voice was hearty over loud. "It's no trouble," I said, echoing Vanessa's own empty words from her text. "It's what I do." The dinner was a masterclass in dissonance. The food was warm and familiar. The conversation was a cold, brittle performance. "How work, Marcus?" I asked, passing him the potatoes. "Volatile market," he said, slicing his chicken with precise cuts. "It's all about agile positioning, recognizing when an asset has reached its peak utility." I nodded as if I understood. I understood perfectly. I looked at my chicken, an asset, peak utility. Vanessa chimed in. "I just closed a deal on a property over on Elm. Older couple downsizing. They got a great price. The house was in impeccable shape, not overly personalized." She took a sip of water. "It makes such a difference for staging." "I'm sure their memories were a hindrance," I said mildly. She blinked, then laughed a little too high. "Oh, Mom, you know what I mean. Neutral cells." Jason pushed his food around his plate. He said little. "So Monday," Marcus said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. A gesture of false confidence. "We're looking forward to it. We have some really exciting thoughts to share with you." "I'm looking forward to it too," I said, smiling. I made sure the smile reached my eyes. It was a skill I had learned in countless office meetings. "It's so nice that you're all thinking of me." The phrase, "thinking of me," seemed to land differently on each of them. Marcus absorbed it as his due. Vanessa looked pleased, as if a compliment had been paid to her efficiency. Jason stared harder at his plate. After dessert, they helped clear the plates, a pantomime of helpfulness. Vanessa washed, Jason dried, Marcus put away. They moved around my kitchen with a familiarity that now felt like reconnaissance. I watched them. I saw the glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. A raised eyebrow from Marcus. A tiny, sharp nod from Vanessa. Jason's averted gaze. When they were gone, the house settled into a profound silence. It was not empty. It was full of the evidence. The lingering smell of Vanessa's perfume in the hallway. Marcus's wine glass, stained with his lip print, still on the counter. A single water spot on the floor where Jason had stood at the sink. I cleaned meticulously. I washed the good china by hand and put it away. I wiped down every surface. I was not cleaning away a meal. I was clearing a stage. The actors had departed. The director remained. I went to bed at my usual time. I did not lie awake staring at the ceiling. I slept. My dreams were not of betrayal, but of lists, of documents, of signatures in crisp black ink. When I woke on Saturday morning, the first day of my counter-operations, the grief was gone. It had been a luxury I could no longer afford. What remained was a clean, cold purpose. I dressed with care, a navy suit, a cream blouse, my pearls. I looked in the mirror. I did not see a victim. I saw a negotiator. I saw Alina St. James, ready to meet her banker. The First Heritage Bank building was a testament to solid, unchanging things. Its limestone facade, the heavy brass doors, the faint smell of polished wood and floor cleaner inside. It had not changed since Charles and I opened our first joint account here 43 years ago. I walked across the marble floor, my heels clicking a firm, even rhythm that echoed in the high-ceilinged space. I did not go to a teller. I approached the reception desk, where a young woman smiled. "I have an appointment with Mr. Higgins," I said. "Alina St. James." "Of course, Mrs. St. James. He's expecting you, right this way." She led me past the rows of desks, back to the offices with their glass walls and wooden doors. Mr. Higgins's door was open. He stood up as I entered, a man in his late 60s with a neatly trimmed gray mustache and kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses. "Alina," he said, coming around the desk to take my hand. His grip was warm and dry. "It's always a pleasure. Please sit, coffee." "No, thank you, Martin, I'm fine." He nodded and returned to his leather chair. On his desk was a file with my name on it. The sight of it, a physical testament to my financial life, was reassuring. You said on the phone you wanted to review your holdings and discuss some changes. Everything all right? I placed my purse on the floor beside me and folded my hands in my lap. My pearls were cool against my skin. Everything is fine, but it is time for a change, a significant one. I understand. He opened the file. Let's start with an overview. As of yesterday's close, your combined holdings across savings, money market, and conservative growth funds total just under $875,000. The number hung in the air. It was the result of a lifetime of work, of sacrifice, of careful planning. It was the number my children had likely guessed at or underestimated. It was the number they assumed would eventually be theirs. I want to move it, I said. He looked up, his professional composure intact. Move it. To different instruments within First Heritage, we have some excellent. I want to move it to another institution, I clarified. My voice was calm, level. I have opened an account at Sentinel Trust. I need all assets liquidated and transferred, with the exception of the household operating account here, which I will maintain with a minimum balance. Mr. Higgins was silent for a moment. He removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a cloth from his desk drawer. This was not a routine transaction. This was the unraveling of a decades-long relationship. That is a substantial transfer, Aliner. May I ask the reason? Has our service been unsatisfactory? Your service has always been exemplary, Martin. This is not a reflection on the bank. It is a personal financial security decision. I met his gaze. I am consolidating my assets and simplifying my estate. I require an institution with specific private trust services that Sentinel offers. It was a half-truth, wrapped in the language of finance he would understand. Private trust services, estate simplification. He nodded slowly, replacing his glasses. The banker in him recognized the logic. The man who had known Charles, who had sent a card when he passed, perhaps sensed something more. Of course, we can facilitate that. The process will take several business days to complete fully. There will be forms, and some of the funds have early withdrawal considerations. We will need to maximize the value for you. I trust you to handle that, I said. I would like to initiate the process today, now if possible. Very well. He turned to his computer, his fingers tapping the keys. We will start with the liquid savings and money market. The funds will take longer. He printed a series of forms and slid them across the desk to me. These authorize the transfers. You'll need to initial here, and sign at the bottom of each page. I took my pen from my purse. It was a good pen, heavy, with smooth black ink. I initialed and signed without hesitation. The scratch of the nib on the paper was the only sound in the room. There is a second matter, I said, as I pushed the signed pages back to him. My will. You are named as a co-executor alongside my son, Marcus. He nodded. Yes, a privilege. I am revoking that. I am removing Marcus as executor entirely, and I am respectfully asking that you also be removed. I will be appointing Sentinel Trust as the sole executor of my estate. This gave him greater pause. He leaned back in his chair. Aliner, if I may, this is a considerable shift. Is there trouble with Marcus? This is about clarity and neutrality, Martin. I believe a corporate executor will eliminate any potential for familial conflict. It is a clean, administrative solution. I offered nothing more. He studied my face for a long moment. I did not look away. He saw the resolve there. The pleasant, polite mother was gone. In her place was a client, decisive and unmovable. I see, he said finally. You will need to have your attorney draft a codicil or a new will to that effect. Once it is executed, you should provide a copy to us for our records. My appointment with my attorney is tomorrow, I said. Then it seems you have everything in hand. He gathered the signed forms into a neat stack. I will process these immediately. You will see the funds begin to move early next week. The statement for the household account will, of course, continue to come here. Thank you, Martin, for everything over the years. It was our pleasure, Aliner, truly. He stood, signaling the meeting was concluded. He came around the desk again and shook my hand. His expression was one of professional regret and perhaps a touch of personal sadness. "You take care of yourself." "I intend to," I said. I left his office, walked back through the bank, and pushed through the heavy brass doors into the Saturday morning sunlight. The transfer was initiated. The first and most crucial piece of my financial emancipation was in motion. They could look at my old accounts all they wanted on Monday. They would find dust and echoes. I drove to a small cafe a few blocks away. I ordered a cup of tea and sat at a corner table. From my purse, I took out my phone and a small notebook. I logged into the new online portal for Sentinel Trust. I watched as the pending transfer from First Heritage appeared. A string of numbers, moving from one column to another. It was not yet complete, but the intention was registered. The machinery had started. I sipped my tea. I felt no exhilaration, only a steady, thrumming certainty. This was not an emotional act. It was a procedural one. I had corrected a vulnerability in my system. My phone vibrated on the table. A text message. It was from Marcus. "Hi, Mom, just thinking about you. Looking forward to Monday. We're all excited to share our ideas. Love you." I stared at the words. We're all excited. The plural pronoun, the unified front, the performance continued. I typed my reply, my fingers moving calmly. "That's wonderful, dear. I'm excited too. See you then." I put the phone away. I finished my tea. I paid the bill. My movements were deliberate, unhurried. I had one more task for the day, one not on any list but my own. I drove to the Botanical Gardens. Charles and I used to walk there on Saturday afternoons. I walked the familiar paths alone now, past the rose arbors and the koi pond. I did not think about my children. I thought about the silence in Mr. Higgins's office after I had stated my terms. It was the sound of a world reordering itself to my instructions. I returned home in the late afternoon. The house was quiet, waiting. I changed out of my suit into more comfortable clothes. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and reviewed the confirmation emails from the bank. Dry, legalistic language that represented my freedom. That evening, I allowed myself one moment of retrospection. I opened the fireproof box in my closet. I looked at our old passports, Charles's military discharge papers, the children's birth certificates. I looked at the previous will, the one that named my 3 children as the beneficiaries of everything I had spent a lifetime building. I touched the paper. It was obsolete now, a relic of a trust that no longer existed. I closed the box and locked it. Tomorrow was for the lawyer. Tonight was for stillness. I had taken the first, irrevocable step. The money was leaving the station. My children, waiting eagerly at the terminal with their empty bags, would find the platform deserted. The meeting with Franklin Briggs on Sunday morning was brisk and efficient. His office was all dark wood and leather, a masculine complement to the bank's formality. I handed him the draft documents I had prepared from our previous consultations. He reviewed them, asked a few clarifying questions in his gravelly voice, and then called in his notary. I signed the new last will and testament, along with the durable power of attorney and healthcare directive, all nomming Sentinel Trust as my executor and agent. The pen felt no different than the one at the bank. The signature was the same. Only the consequences had changed. I left his office with the executed copies in a stiff cardboard folder, the weight of it insignificant in my hands. I drove home directly. It was just past 11. The house felt different now, not just a home but a sovereign state. I had secured its borders financially and legally. Now came the interior work. I changed into old slacks and a comfortable blouse, tying a scarf over my hair. I went to the hallway closet and took out several large, flat cardboard boxes I had saved from online deliveries. I carried them up the narrow pull-down stairs to the attic. The attic air was still and warm, smelling of cedar and dust. Light filtered through a single, cobwebbed window, illuminating the floating moats. The space was a timeline of our family, organized not by date but by inertia. Things placed here and never retrieved. I started with the far corner, where the earliest artifacts rested. I opened a plastic storage bin. Inside were baby clothes, tiny and yellowed with age. A knitted white sweater with ducks on it. a pair of soft leather shoes no bigger than my palm. I held the sweater for a moment. I remembered the feel of small, warm weight in my arms. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in one of the cardboard boxes. I moved to another bin. School projects. A clay ashtray from Marcus, lumpy and glazed a violent green. A diorama of the solar system from Vanessa with meticulously painted planets. A folder of Jason's early drawings, all stick figures and chaotic color. I sorted through them. I kept nothing. Each item went into the box. The physical act was methodical. I did not pause to weep. I was not a curator preserving a museum. I was an archaeologist clearing a site. The memories were mine to keep in my mind. The objects were just clutter they had left behind and now planned to discard along with me. I found the box of old sports equipment. Marcus's first baseball mitt, oiled and cracked. Vanessa's ballet slippers, the satin worn through at the toes. Jason's soccer cleats, still caked with ancient mud. I added them to a second box. Then I went to the rack where I stored a few pieces of older furniture. Among them was a small wooden rocking chair. It had been in the nursery for each of them. Charles had rocked them all to sleep in it. I ran my hand over the smooth armrests, worn down by the pressure of his hands and mine over countless nights. I did not take it. That, I decided, would stay. It was my memory, not theirs. But the other items, a painted crib that was now unsafe, a changing table, a mobile of faded stars, I dismantled and added to the growing pile. By mid-afternoon, I had 4 large boxes sealed with packing tape. They were heavy with the physical proof of my motherhood. I carried them down, one by one, my muscles protesting. I lined them up in the garage beside my car. I knew the place to take them. The Community Resource Center on 5th Street. It was a bustling place that offered everything from job training to after-school programs. They ran a donation closet for families in need. I loaded the boxes into the trunk and back seat, my sedan sinking low with the weight. The drive was short. The center was housed in a repurposed church, its doors painted a bright, welcoming blue. A young man with a bright smile and a center t-shirt helped me unload. "Wow, this is a lot of great stuff," he said, peeking into a box. "These kids' clothes are in amazing condition." "They've been stored carefully," I said. "Are you sure you want to part with all of it? Some of these things look like keepsakes." "I'm sure," I said, my voice was firm. "I want them to be used, to be of use to someone." He nodded, sensing a finality he did not question. "Well, we are incredibly grateful. This will help a lot of families. Do you need a receipt for tax purposes?" "Yes, please." I followed him inside to a cluttered office. The space hummed with activity. I could hear children laughing in a room down the hall, the tap of computer keys, the murmur of conversation. Life moving forward. He wrote out a donation receipt, listing the items in general categories: children's clothing, toys, sports equipment, baby furniture. He handed it to me. I folded it and put it in my purse. It was a document of transfer. As I turned to leave, an older woman with a kind face and graying braids stopped me. She wore a name tag that read, "Maya, Director." "Thank you again," she said, extending her hand. "These donations mean the world. We have a young mom starting our nursing assistant program next week. She has a 2-year-old and almost nothing. The crib and those clothes will be a fresh start for her." I shook her hand. "I am glad to hear it." She looked at me, her eyes sharp and perceptive. "It's hard sometimes letting go of the past, but it makes room, doesn't it?" "It does," I agreed. And for the first time that day, I felt a shift inside me, not of loss, but of lightness. I was not discarding my history. I was redirecting its energy. The love and care embodied in those objects were not being erased. They were being passed on to a new story, one that began with need, not entitlement. I drove home. The car was empty now. The attic was not bare, but it was organized. What remained were my things, Charles's things, the photographs, the letters, the few treasures we had chosen together. The rest, the physical evidence of my primary identity for 35 years, the mother was gone. I showered the dust away. I dressed in fresh clothes. I made a simple supper. As I ate, I took out the donation receipt and placed it on the kitchen table next to the folder from the lawyer and the bank transfer confirmations on my phone. A triad of documents: legal, financial, emotional. That night, I did not go to the attic. I sat in my living room and read a book. The silence was no longer accusatory or waiting. It was simply silence, my own. The house felt truly like mine again, unburdened by the invisible weight of their future claims on it. The severance was not complete. That would come tomorrow in person, but the symbolic act was finished. I had taken the memories they had so carelessly planned to box up and sell, and I had given them away. I had transformed their intended inheritance into a gift for strangers. It was a quiet, powerful reclamation. I touched my pearls, a habit now, a grounding gesture. They were all I chose to keep from the past that was solely mine. Everything else was moving forward. The clarity from the previous day held through the night. I woke on Sunday morning not to a quiet house, but to a prepared one. The documents from Franklin Briggs's office lay on the kitchen table beside the bank confirmations and the donation receipt. I made coffee and sat before them, reviewing the sequence as if it were a project plan. Legal, financial, emotional, all lines of defense established. At 9 o'clock, I called the main number for Sentinel Trust. A representative answered, her voice professionally warm. I provided my client number and confirmed the successful receipt of the will and power of attorney documents, which Franklin's office had electronically filed late the previous afternoon. "Everything is in order, Mrs. St. James," she said. "Your profile is complete. Is there anything else we can assist you with today?" "There is one matter," I said. "The bequest outlined in Article 4, Section B of the will, the establishment of the scholarship fund. I would like to discuss the nomming and specific criteria." "Of course. Let me connect you with our Philanthropic Services Division." I was transferred. A man named Robert Chen introduced himself. I explained my intention: a recurring annual scholarship for a woman over the age of 50 enrolling in an accredited degree or certification program. It was to be need-based, but with strong emphasis on personal essay and demonstrated commitment to changing her life's trajectory. No relation to me was to be considered. The fund would be named the Eleanor and Charles St. James Second Act Scholarship. "A beautiful initiative, Mrs. St. James," Mr. Chen said. I could hear the tapping of keys. "We will draft the full criteria and administration guidelines for your review. The principal from your estate will be placed in a managed fund to ensure its longevity." "Thank you," I said. "Please expedite the draft. I would like it finalized soon." I ended the call. The mechanism was in place. My money would not sit in their bank accounts. It would fuel the ambitions of women who had likely put themselves last for decades. Women who understood the value of a second act because they had lived a first one of sacrifice. The irony was a quiet, private satisfaction. I dressed with the same care I had for the bank. A charcoal gray skirt suit, a ivory shell, my pearls. I looked like a woman going to a board meeting, which in essence I was. I was the board of one, ratifying the future of my own legacy. My phone buzzed as I was collecting my purse. A text from Vanessa. "Good morning, Mom. All set for tomorrow. We're so eager to talk. It's going to be great." I typed back, my fingers steady. "Good morning. Yes, all set. I'm eager too. See you at 9. I sent it. The exchange was a script we were both following, but only I had the full stage directions. The drive to Franklin Briggs's office was familiar now. His building was quiet on a Sunday. Our meeting was by special arrangement. His secretary let me in, her expression politely curious. Franklin was waiting in the conference room this time, not his office. The long mahogany table was bare except for a single file and a pen. "Eleanor," he said, standing. "Please." He gestured to a chair. I sat. He took the seat beside me, not across, minimizing the formality. He opened the file. It contained the executed copy of my will. "Everything is filed with Sentinel and with the county recorder," he said. "It is legally effective as of yesterday's date and time. The previous will is revoked. This is the only extant document." "Thank you, Franklin." He paused, tapping a finger on the table. I feel I must, as your friend of 30 years and not just your attorney, ask you one more time. This is a final severance. It sends a message that cannot be taken back. Are you certain this is the path? I looked at him. He had known Charles. He had attended summer barbecues where the children ran through sprinklers on the lawn. He was not just a lawyer in this moment. I am certain, I said. They made the first severance. They just didn't bother to tell me. They decided my life, my home, and my assets were a group project to be dismantled. I am simply formalizing the new corporate structure, one where they are not shareholders. He leaned back, a slow sigh escaping him. I read the chat log you forwarded. It was clinical. It was a business plan, I corrected, and I have evaluated it. The ROI for the proposed shareholders was unacceptable. I have reallocated the capital. A faint smile touched his lips. You always were the best organized person I knew. Even Charles said you kept the family running like a precision engine. He was the heart, I was the clockwork, I said. It was a simple statement of fact. The heart is gone, the clockwork remains, and it tells me it is time. He nodded, accepting. Then my job is done. You have the copy. Sentinel has the original. Your instructions are clear. Is there anything else you need from me? No, you have been a good friend and a fine counsel. Thank you for accommodating me on a Sunday. Any time, Alina. He walked me to the door. For what it's worth, I think Charles would be proud of you. Not for this. He gestured vaguely at the folder in my hand, but for having the strength to define your own terms. I did not know if that was true. Charles had loved his children fiercely, but he had also loved me. He had believed in fairness. Thank you, Franklin. I drove to a small park overlooking the river. It was a place Charles and I had often come to with a picnic lunch. I sat on a bench, the folder beside me. I watched the water move, steady and irreversible, toward the distant bridge. The final signature had been more than a legal action. It was the period at the end of a very long sentence. The sentence of my life as their primary caretaker, their safety net, their eventual payday. That story was over. A new document was now in effect. I opened the folder and looked at the first page of the will. Last WILL and Testament of ELEANORMARIESD. James. Below, the legalese stated my sound mind and clear intent. I flipped to Article 4. I give, devise, and bequeath the rest, residue, and remainder of my estate, both real and personal, of whatever kind and wherever situated, to the trustee of the Alina and Charles St. James Second Act Scholarship Fund. The words were dry. The impact would be seismic. For Marcus, it was the deletion of a line item. For Vanessa, the cancellation of a major commission. For Jason, the loss of a safety net he likely thought he didn't deserve, but counted on nonetheless. I closed the folder. The wind off the river was cool. I stood up and walked back to my car. The preparatory phase was complete. The legal, financial, and emotional architectures were built and fortified. All that remained was the unveiling. At home, I placed the will in the fireproof box alongside the older, voided one. The past and the future, side by side. I made a light lunch. I tended to my roses. I performed the ordinary rituals of a Sunday. But each action felt deliberate, a calm rehearsal for the performance to come. Tomorrow, the actors would arrive, expecting to find a stage set to their specifications. They would find instead that the director had rewritten the entire play. The alarm did not wake me. I was already awake, lying in the pre-dawn gray, watching the familiar shadows of my bedroom take shape. The digital clock read 5:47. I had slept, but lightly, my mind a quiet engine idling in neutral. There was no anxiety, only a focused anticipation. Today was the day of execution. I rose and began my routine with deliberate slowness. A shower, the careful application of moisturizer to my face and hands. I stood before my closet. The choice of armor was important. I selected a dress of deep cobalt blue, a color of authority and calm. It was simple in cut, well-tailored, with a neckline that sat just above the collarbone. I added sheer stockings and low-heeled pumps. Practical but elegant, I would be on my feet. I sat at my vanity. I styled my silver gray hair into its usual soft waves, ensuring every strand was in place. I applied a light foundation, a touch of mascara, a muted lipstick. The face that looked back at me was composed, polished, unreadable. Finally, I opened the velvet-lined box. I lifted my mother's pearls and fastened them around my neck. The cool weight was both a comfort and a declaration. Downstairs, the house was utterly silent. I went to the kitchen. I filled the kettle with fresh water and set it on the stove. I took out the good china teacups, the ones with the delicate gold rim, and arranged them on a tray. A small pitcher for milk, a bowl of sugar cubes with silver tongs. I measured loose-leaf Earl Grey into the porcelain pot. While the water heated, I walked into the living room. I opened the curtains fully, allowing the morning sun to flood the space. I adjusted the cushions on the sofa and the armchairs. I positioned my own chair, the one Charles had favored, slightly apart, facing the sofa where they would likely sit. A position of judgment, not participation. I returned to the kitchen as the kettle began its low whistle. I poured the boiling water over the tea leaves, then placed the lid on the pot. I set the tray on the coffee table in the living room. The ritual was complete. It was 7:55 a.m. I had over an hour. I did not pace. I sat in my designated chair, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I watched the sun climb, painting rectangles of light across the oak floor. I listened to the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the hallway clock, the sound of my own breathing, steady and even. My mind did not race. It reviewed facts. The bank transfers were in progress. The will was executed and filed. The donation was complete. My counter-operations were not plans, they were accomplished facts. The evidence was assembled in a manila folder on the small table beside my chair. Inside were printouts of the transfer confirmations, a copy of the new will, and the donation receipt. I did not need to look at them. I knew every line. I thought about what they would bring. Marcus would have brochures for facilities, spreadsheets with cost-benefit analyses. Vanessa would have comparative market analyses, photos of staged living rooms. Jason would bring his reluctant silence. They would have a script rehearsed over their group chat. They would lead with concern. They would talk about safety, companionship, simplifying my life. They would frame the sale of my home as the logical next step, the unburdening. They expected resistance, of course. Tears, perhaps. Guilt. The emotional leverage of a mother's love. They were prepared to apply pressure, to use their unity against my solitary sentimentality. They believed the weight of their collective logic would eventually bend me. They saw me as a soft target. The clock in the hall chimed 8:30. I stood and walked to the front window. The street was quiet. I looked at my reflection in the glass, a poised woman in a blue dress, waiting. I was not waiting for them. I was waiting for the moment to begin the final act. I returned to my chair. I poured a cup of tea for myself, adding a splash of milk. I took a sip. The warmth was bracing, the flavor familiar. This was my house, my tea, my life. At 10 minutes to 9, I heard a car door shut. Then another. Firm, decisive sounds. I did not move from my chair. I placed my teacup back on its saucer. I listened to the footsteps on the front walk. A confident stride, a lighter, quicker step, a slower, dragging one. 3 sets. The doorbell rang. A clean, two-tone chime that echoed through the hall. I remained seated. I counted to 10 in my head. Let them stand on the porch for a moment. Let them wonder. I rose smoothly and walked to the door. I did not check my reflection. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob, and opened the door. They stood there, a united front as predicted. Marcus in a sharp blazer, holding a leather portfolio. Vanessa in a chic pantsuit, a large tote bag on her shoulder. Jason behind them, hands in his pockets, looking at the welcome mat. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice pitched with false heartiness. "Good morning." "Good morning," I said, my tone neutral, welcoming but not warm. "Please come in." I stepped back, holding the door wide. They filed past me, each bringing a different scent into my hall. Marcus's citrus cologne, Vanessa's floral perfume, Jason's faint smell of laundry detergent. "You look nice," Vanessa said, her eyes performing a quick, appraising scan of my dress, my hair, the pearls. "Thank you," I said. "I made tea. It's in the living room." I led them in. They instinctively moved to sit together on the large sofa, as I knew they would. Marcus and Vanessa on either end, Jason sinking into the middle. I resumed my seat in the armchair opposite them. The coffee table with the tea tray was between us, a no man's land. "Can I pour anyone tea?" I asked. "No, thank you, Mom," Marcus said, placing his portfolio on his knees. "We're fine." Vanessa shook her head, already unzipping her tote bag. Jason muttered a soft, "No, thanks." Silence settled for a beat. They exchanged a quick glance. It was time for their opening move. Marcus leaned forward, his expression arranged into one of sober concern. "Mom," he began, "we asked to come over today because we love you very much. We've been talking, the three of us, and we're worried." I let him speak. I maintained eye contact, my expression one of attentive concern. It was important to let them run their script, to let them commit. "We're worried about you being here all alone," he continued, his voice dropping to a practiced, sincere register. "This house is big. There are stairs. What if you fell? What if you needed help and couldn't reach a phone? The what-ifs keep us up at night, Mom." Vanessa nodded vigorously, leaning in. "We just want you to be safe and happy, and to have companionship, people your own age, activities." Jason stared at his hands, clenched in his lap. "I appreciate your concern," I said, my voice even. "It's very thoughtful." I took a small sip of my tea, the cup steady in my hand. "Did you have a specific solution in mind?" This was their cue. They exchanged another glance, this one tinged with relief. I was being compliant, asking the right questions. Marcus opened his leather portfolio. "We've done a lot of research," he said, pulling out several glossy brochures. He slid them across the coffee table toward me. They fanned out like a hand of cards. Maple Grove Senior Living featured a smiling white-haired couple walking through gardens. Harmony Hills showed a modern dining room with linen-clad tables. The Laurels highlighted an arts and crafts studio. "These are top-tier facilities," Marcus explained, his finger tapping each brochure. "Full continuum of care. Independent living now, with the option for assisted living or memory care later, all on one campus. No more worries about maintenance, cooking, or security." Vanessa reached into her tote and pulled out a sleek tablet. She woke it up and turned it so I could see the screen. It displayed a series of photographs of beautifully staged, empty living rooms and kitchens. "And we've looked at the financials, Mom. This house," she gestured around us, "is your biggest asset, but it's also a drain. Property taxes, insurance, repairs. By selling it, you could liquidate that equity and fund a luxurious, carefree lifestyle at one of these places with money to spare." She swiped, and a graph appeared. I had a colleague do a comparative market analysis. Based on recent sales of comparable properties in this neighborhood, we can confidently list at 750 and expect a final sale price in the mid to high 700s. It's a seller's market. The numbers hung in the air. They were precise, professional. Devoid of any mention of the photo albums on the shelf, the scuff on the floorboard from Charles's favorite chair, the window where I watched the seasons change for 35 years. "It would be a seamless transition," Marcus picked up, sensing a need to reinsert the care narrative. "We would handle everything. The listing, the sale, the move, you wouldn't have to lift a finger. We'd help you choose a lovely 2-bedroom suite at Maple Grove. They have a wonderful library. You could take your favorite things. We just streamline." I looked at the brochures. I looked at the graphs on the tablet. I looked at each of their faces. Marcus was confident, the deal-maker closing in. Vanessa was eager, already mentally spending her third of the proceeds. Jason was pale, his jaw tight, looking anywhere but at me. I placed my teacup back on its saucer with a soft click. The sound was minute, but in the quiet room it was distinct. They all focused on me. "I see," I said, nodding slowly. "So the proposal is that I sell my home, move into a managed facility, and use the proceeds from the sale of my asset to fund my new living expenses." "Exactly," Marcus said, a smile touching his lips. It was the smile of a man who has just presented an irrefutable business case. "And what happens to the remainder of the proceeds?" I asked, tilting my head. "After the buy-in fees and the monthly costs." A brief hesitation. Vanessa jumped in smooth. "Well, that would be your money, Mom. For your expenses, your travel, whatever you like, it would be a financial cushion. And of course, it would eventually become part of your estate for us to manage in accordance with your wishes. She said the last part with a wave of her hand, as if it were a distant, trivial formality. For you to manage, I repeated, not a question. We're your executors, Marcus said, as if reminding a forgetful child. It's our responsibility to ensure your legacy is handled wisely. I let the silence stretch. I watched Jason flinch at the word legacy. I saw Marcus's smile tighten, just at the edges. Vanessa's pleasant mask remained fixed. It's a comprehensive plan, I said finally. You've clearly put a great deal of thought into it. You've considered the financial angles, the practicalities, the asset management. Marcus leaned back, the tension in his shoulders easing. We have. It's what family does. We look out for each other. Yes, I said. Family does look out for each other. I paused, letting the words settle. I, too, have been doing some thinking, some planning of my own. I saw Marcus's eyes narrow slightly. Vanessa's head tilted in polite curiosity. Jason finally looked up, his expression one of dread. Given that you've come here with a formal proposal, I continued, my voice calm and conversational, it seems only fair that I present mine. Would you like to hear it? They stared at me. Marcus's confident expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Vanessa's polite smile froze. Jason's eyes widened. Your proposal, Marcus repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. Yes, I said. You've taken the time to prepare a presentation for me. It would be discourteous not to reciprocate. I reached to the small table beside my chair and picked up the manila folder. I placed it on my lap but did not open it. First, let me address the core assumptions of your plan. I looked at Marcus. You assume my financial affairs are static, that the accounts you are vaguely aware of are the full extent of my assets, and that they are easily accessible to you as future executors. I turned to Vanessa. You assume this house is an asset waiting for your professional intervention, and that my emotional attachment to it is a weakness to be leveraged, not a strength to be respected. Finally, I looked at Jason, who seemed to shrink into the sofa. And you assume that going along with a plan you feel is wrong is easier than defending what is right. Mom, what are you talking about? Vanessa said, a forced laugh in her voice. We're not assuming anything, we're trying to help. I know you are, I said. You are trying to help yourselves. Your chat group, the stakeholders, made that quite clear. The color drained from Marcus's face. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Jason made a small, choked sound. You saw that, Marcus whispered. I did on Friday evening. Operation Nursing Home starts Monday. It's a gold mine, but it's stuck in a time capsule. Sentiment isn't an asset class, it's a liability. I found the language quite illuminating. My voice was calm, analytical, as if reviewing a disappointing audit report. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at his siblings, a flash of anger in his eyes, anger at being discovered, not at the betrayal itself. Vanessa recovered first, shifting into damage control. Mom, that chat, it was just us brainstorming. The words came out all wrong. We were just thinking out loud in a private space. You have to understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for her justification. I understand that you saw a problem in my home, and you designed a business solution. I have no quarrel with your methodology, only with your faulty data. I opened the manila folder. I removed the first set of papers, printed confirmations from my online banking portal. I leaned forward and placed them on the coffee table, directly on top of the Maple Grove brochure. These are transfer confirmations. As of Saturday morning, I initiated the movement of the entirety of my liquid assets, savings, money markets, investment funds, from First Heritage Bank to a new institution. The process is nearly complete. The balance in the accounts you might have known about is now negligible. Marcus snatched up the papers, his eyes scanning the numbers, the institution names. His face went from pale to a sickly gray. You can't. Why would you do this? Financial security and simplification, I said, echoing the very language they had used. I have removed myself as a liability from your balance sheet. I took out the second document, a copy of the executed will. I placed it on the tablet showing Vanessa's market analysis. This is my new last will and testament, executed yesterday. It revokes all previous versions. In it, I name a corporate trustee, Sentinel Trust, as my sole executor. You and Martin Higgins have been removed. Furthermore, I have left the entirety of my estate, including this house and any remaining assets, to a charitable trust. The Alina and Charles St. James Second Act Scholarship Fund. It will provide scholarships to women over 50 returning to education. Vanessa made a sharp, gasping noise as if she'd been punched. You left it to charity, all of it. To a specific cause, yes. One that values determination over entitlement. Finally, I took out the donation receipt from the Community Resource Center. I slid it toward Jason. And this, on Sunday, I donated several boxes of items from the attic. Childhood belongings, keepsakes, toys. They have been given to a center that supports families in need. I have, as you suggested, streamlined. I found it was not the house that was cluttered with the past, but my heart. I have cleared that space. Jason picked up the receipt with trembling fingers. He read it, his lips moving soundlessly. When he looked up at me, his eyes were bright with tears. You gave away my baseball glove. It was collecting dust, I said, not unkindly. Now it may help a child learn to catch. A better use, I think. I leaned back in my chair, my hands once again folded in my lap. The 3 documents lay on the table between us, covering their brochures and graphs. A complete, silent rebuttal. So, to summarize my proposal, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the stunned silence. I will be remaining in my home. My finances are secure and under my sole control. My legacy has been redirected to a purpose I find meaningful. And our relationship henceforth will be based on mutual respect and genuine affection, or it will not exist at all. I will not be a problem for you to solve or an asset for you to manage. Are there any questions? The silence that followed my question was absolute. It was not a thoughtful silence. It was the silence of a vacuum, where all their prepared words, their justifications, their calculated concern, had been violently sucked out and replaced with nothing. Marcus was the first to move. He stared at the bank transfer confirmations in his hand, the paper trembling slightly. His face underwent a rapid transformation, shock, then comprehension, then a deep, furious humiliation. He was a man who had run the numbers and found his own calculations used against him. You did this, he breathed, his voice low and tight. You went behind our backs, you deliberately sabotaged. I secured my own future, I corrected calmly. You were planning to do it for me. I simply preferred to handle my own affairs. This is insane. The words burst from him, loud in the quiet room. He threw the papers back onto the table. You're throwing away your family's inheritance over a misunderstanding in a private chat. That money is for your grandchildren, for our futures. The money is mine, I said, my tone cooling several degrees. And I have decided its future. As for my grandchildren, I suggest you build their futures with your own labor, as your father and I did for you. That is the legacy we actually gave you. It seems you misplaced it. Vanessa found her voice next, but it was shrill, stripped of its professional polish. A scholarship fund? For strangers? Mom, you can't be serious. This is a temper tantrum. You're hurting yourself to punish us. I am not hurting at all, Vanessa, I said, looking directly at her. In fact, I feel remarkably unburdened. As for punishment, you have confused cause and effect. Your actions were the cause. My decisions are the effect. A simple business principle. She shook her head, her eyes darting to the will as if it were a poisonous thing. You let some lawyer talk you into this. They prey on lonely older people. We can fix this. We can get it revoked. We'll get a doctor to evaluate your state of mind. Vanessa, I did not raise my voice. I simply let her name hang, a flat, cold stop. Her mouth snapped shut. My state of mind has never been clearer. I sat with Franklin Briggs, who has known you since you were in pigtails. He asked me if I was certain. I was. I sat with Martin Higgins at the bank. He asked if there was trouble. I told him it was a personal decision. They both respected my clarity. You would do well to do the same. It was Jason who broke then. Not with anger, but with a raw, choking sob. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The donation receipt fluttered from his grip to the floor. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, the words thick and wet. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I knew it was wrong. I knew it." Marcus shot him a look of pure disgust. "Stop it, Jason. This is exactly what she wants, emotional manipulation." I ignored Marcus. I looked at Jason, the youngest, the one who had been dragged along. "You were sorry on Friday. You are sorry now. But on Monday, you still came. You still sat there and let them present their plan. Sorry is a feeling, Jason. Integrity is an action. You chose one over the other." He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears. There was no defense in his eyes, only a profound, ugly shame. That was perhaps the most genuine reaction of the three. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. "This isn't over. We'll contest the will. We'll prove undue influence. You can't just cut your children out without cause." "You are the cause, Marcus," I said, remaining seated, looking up at him. "And I have documented it. I have a copy of your stakeholders' chat. I have records of my own sound financial planning. I have reputable witnesses to my mental competency. Contest it. Spend your own money on lawyers. You will lose. And you will only prove, publicly and expensively, exactly the kind of men you are." He glared down at me, a lifetime of assumed authority crumbling in his eyes. He had always seen me as part of the background furniture of his life, reliable and static. He was now realizing I was the architect who had built the room, and I could change the locks. Vanessa stood too, mechanically collecting her tablet, shoving the brochures back into her bag. Her movements were jerky, unreal. The deal of her life had just evaporated. "You've destroyed this family," she whispered, not looking at me. "No," I said, standing now to face them at my full height. "You did that when you decided my value was only in what you could sell. I am merely cleaning up the wreckage. The family you spoke of loving at dinner on Sunday was already gone. You were just dining with its ghost." I walked to the entrance of the living room, indicating the hall, the front door. "Our meeting is concluded. You have my proposal. There will be no further negotiations." They stood there for a moment, a shattered tableau. Marcus, rigid with fury. Vanessa, hollow-eyed with loss. Jason, broken with regret. "Get out of my house," I said, the words not loud but final. They moved then, a slow, shuffling procession of defeat. Jason trailed behind, pausing to look back at me, his mouth working, but no sound came out. I held his gaze for a second, then gave a small, firm shake of my head. Now was not the time for his apologies. I watched as they filed out the front door. Marcus did not look back. Vanessa stumbled on the step. Jason closed the door softly behind him, a quiet click that felt more definitive than a slam. I stood in the empty hallway. The living room behind me held the scattered evidence of the confrontation. The teacup, the folder, the papers on the table. The sun was higher now, bright and clear. From outside, I heard the sound of car doors, engines starting, and then the fade of tires on asphalt. It was done. The revelation was complete. The transfer of power was absolute. I felt no triumph, only a vast, quiet stillness. I touched my pearls, a familiar gesture. They were cool, solid, real, a touchstone. I turned and walked back into the sunlight of my living room to begin clearing the table. I cleared the table. I placed the teacup and pot in the sink. I gathered the bank documents, the will, and the donation receipt back into the manila folder. The glossy brochures from Maple Grove and the others I left in a stack on the coffee table. I would throw them away later. There was no hurry. The house was quiet again, but the quality of the silence had changed. Before, it had been a waiting silence, heavy with impending conflict. Now it was a settled silence. It was mine, uninterrupted. I changed out of the blue dress, hanging it carefully in my closet. I put on comfortable slacks and a soft sweater. I returned to the living room and sat in my chair. I did not think about their faces as they left. I thought about the practical matters ahead. I needed to call Sentinel Trust to confirm they had received no contact from any attorneys. I needed to check the status of the final fund transfers. I made a mental list. My phone, which I had left in the kitchen, began to vibrate. I let it ring. After it stopped, it immediately began again. I stood and walked to the counter. The screen showed Marcus's name. I did not answer. The calls stopped after the third attempt. Then a text message arrived. "Mom, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. Call me." I deleted the message. I blocked his number. I did the same for Vanessa's number when her call came through moments later. It was not an act of anger, but of boundary setting. They had chosen a specific channel of communication for their plans, their private chat. I was now choosing mine, silence. A different text came in from Jason. "I am so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. I want to fix this." I looked at his words. They were better than his siblings, but still focused on fixing, on undoing. I did not reply. I did not block him. I left the line open, but silent. Some doors are better left ajar, with the understanding that only those who approach with the right key may enter. I spent the afternoon in the garden. The roses needed deadheading. The soil around the hydrangeas was dry. I worked with my hands in the dirt, the sun warm on my back. It was physical, simple labor with a clear result. The weeds came out. The plants were watered. Progress was visible. That evening, I called the Sentinel Trust helpline. I spoke with Mr. Chen. He confirmed the scholarship fund criteria had been finalized and the trust documents were in order. He also informed me that no inquiries had been received from any outside parties regarding my will or accounts. "Everything is proceeding exactly as you've directed, Mrs. St. James," he said. "Thank you," I replied. I made a light dinner. I ate at the kitchen table, reading a novel. The story was about people in another country, with problems I did not have. It was a pleasant distraction. The days that followed took on a new rhythm. I established a routine. Mornings were for correspondence and managing my modest household account. Afternoons were for reading, walking, or working in the garden. I began researching a course in botanical illustration at the local community college. It was something I had always considered but never pursued, citing a lack of time. Time was now a resource I had in abundance. A week after the confrontation, a letter arrived in a thick, formal envelope. It was from a law firm I did not recognize. I opened it at my desk. It was a sternly worded letter alleging undue influence and questionable mental capacity regarding recent changes to my estate plan. It demanded a meeting and the provision of all related documents. It was signed by an attorney representing Marcus and Vanessa St. James. I felt no alarm. I felt a mild contempt. It was the predictable move, the last gasp of people who believed the system existed solely for their benefit. I took the letter, placed it in my scanner, and created a digital copy. I then composed an email to Franklin Briggs and my contact at Sentinel Trust, attaching the scan. "Please find attached a communication I received today," I wrote. "I have no intention of responding to it directly. I authorize you to handle any and all follow-up as you see fit to protect the integrity of my estate plan. I am confident in the legal soundness of my documents and my own demonstrable capacity." Replies came within the hour. Franklin's was terse. "Consider it handled. They have no standing." Sentinel was more detailed, assuring me their legal team would respond appropriately and that such challenges were rarely successful when proper procedures had been followed. I filed the original letter in a new folder I labeled Legal. Then I went outside and watered the roses. Another week passed. I received a postcard from the Community Resource Center. It was a printed thank you note, but Maya, the director, had handwritten a message on the back. "The young mom I told you about started her program. She loves the crib. Thank you for being part of her new beginning. Maya." I placed the postcard on my refrigerator, held by a magnet. It was a small, bright square of purpose. One afternoon, my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Jason stood on the porch. He was alone. He held no papers, no phone. He just stood there looking at the door. I hesitated. Then I opened it, but left the storm door closed between us. We looked at each other through the glass. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "Hello, Jason." Can I come in? Just for a minute." "No," I said. "Not today. What do you need?" He nodded, accepting the boundary. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. His eyes were clear but sad. I quit my job, the one Marcus got for me. I'm applying to a trade school for HVAC repair. I considered this. It was a concrete action. That sounds like a practical choice. I'm also seeing a therapist to figure out why I go along with things. He swallowed. I'm not asking for anything. I know I can't fix what we did. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to do better, to be better. That was the key difference. Not an apology for the past, but a statement of action for the future. It was not about fixing us. It was about fixing himself. I am glad to hear that, Jason, I said. My voice was not warm, but it was not ice. It was factual. I wish you success. Thank you, he shifted his weight. I won't bother you, but if someday you ever wanted to have coffee, I'd like that. Perhaps, I said. Someday is a long time from now. Focus on your school. He nodded again. He gave a small, awkward wave, then turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away. I closed and locked the door. I went to the living room window. The late afternoon sun slanted across the floor, just as it had a week before. The room was clean, orderly, peaceful. I touched my pearls. They were a connection to my mother, to a line of women who had endured, who had made difficult choices. I was now a link in that chain. The revenge was complete. It was not a fiery explosion, but a quiet, structural renovation. I had dismantled their plan and used the materials to build a fortress for my own future and a bridge for strangers. The anger was gone, converted into the energy of self-preservation. The sadness was a closed chapter. I was a leaner St. James. The house was mine. The silence was mine. The days ahead were mine. I turned from the window and went to my desk. I opened the catalog for the community college and found the number for the continuing education office. I picked up the phone and dialed. It was time to enroll.